Imagine this. You've spent years trying to heal. Years of therapy, years of self-help books, years of searching for that perfect solution to fix the broken parts of you. You've prayed for peace, you've worked hard for progress, and you've surrounded yourself with people who promise to understand. But one morning, you wake up and realize something devastating. You're still sick. You're still fragmented. You're still bound by the same invisible chains that have held you in a state of constant longing and quiet despair. The reason, though, isn't because you're failing. It's because you've been trying to heal in the very place that made you sick. This isn't some abstract, philosophical statement. It's real. Think about it. How can you escape a prison if you never leave the cell? How can you heal from the wounds of your past if you never step outside the environment that created those wounds in the first place? You've been taught that healing is a linear process. The culture we live in tells us that if we just keep going, keep trying, keep pushing ourselves through the same routines, we will eventually overcome whatever burdens us. But have you ever stopped to question that belief? Have you considered the possibility that what you need isn't more work, but a change of environment? This is the paradox that traps so many of us. You cannot fix a wound while standing in the place where it was inflicted. You cannot outgrow the very soil that nourishes your toxic thoughts. No matter how hard you try, the past always finds its way into the present when you insist on staying within its reach. Healing isn't just about time or effort. It's about the courage to leave behind what harms you. And yet, this simple truth seems so elusive. We find ourselves stuck, trapped in familiar spaces, familiar faces, and familiar patterns, wondering why the wound refuses to heal. What if by continuing to remain in the places that have hurt us, whether they be toxic relationships, destructive environments, or even our own minds, we are merely rehearsing our suffering in different forms, never truly escaping it? What if the very act of trying to heal in the same place is the greatest hindrance to our recovery? The question is no longer, how can I fix this? It is, how can I leave behind the very place that is keeping me broken? It's a question that challenges everything you believed about growth, progress, and healing. It's uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. It doesn't offer easy answers. But it is the kind of question that, if you dare to grapple with it, will change your life. It forces you to confront a deep and unsettling truth. You are not the problem. The environment is. The place you've been trying to heal from is the very place that's been keeping you trapped. And so, the question looms. What happens when you realize that to heal, you must first leave? What happens when you finally accept that healing requires not just a change in perspective, but a total escape from the environment that has shaped you? This is not just a question of physical spaces. It's a question of emotional and psychological spaces as well. What if the environment you need to escape isn't just a room or a house, but a pattern of thinking, a cycle of behavior, or a worldview that has kept you tethered to your past? What if true healing lies in the act of detachment, detaching not just from toxic people or places, but from the very identity you forged in those environments? The answer to this question won't come from a quick fix or a self-help mantra. It will come from deep introspection, from understanding that healing is not about fixing what's broken in the same place it was shattered. It's about the courage to leave and to let go. There's a reason why most of us stay in the very places that broke us. It's not just convenience or ignorance. It's something deeper, something that runs through the core of our psychology. The fear of change, the terror of the unknown, the comfort in familiarity. But at its root, it's something far more profound, a belief that we can't heal because we don't truly understand what it is that needs healing. And this is where the psychological and philosophical roots of our suffering lie. At first glance, the notion that healing requires leaving behind what has caused us harm might seem simple. almost too simple. But when you peel back the layers of our psychology, you begin to understand why this is so difficult. To leave a toxic environment isn't merely a physical act. It's a mental and emotional challenge that runs deep. It touches our most primal fears, the fear of rejection, the fear of loneliness, the fear of becoming something we no longer recognize. Consider the ideas of Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in psychology. Jung proposed the concept of the shadow, the unconscious part of ourselves that we repress or deny because it's too painful to face. The shadow is composed of all the traits and emotions that society, or our upbringing, deems unacceptable. Yet these very traits are a part of us. And when we deny them, they begin to exert their power over us in unconscious ways. They shape our behaviors, our choices, and often they lead us back to the places that wounded us in the first place. In other words, by staying in the place that made us sick, we're merely giving the shadow more power. We repeat old patterns without realizing it because we haven't fully confronted the aspects of ourselves that need healing. When you're stuck in a cycle of emotional injury, it often feels like the environment itself is a kind of prison. But what if the real prison is not the environment around you, but the way you see it? Friedrich Nietzsche, the great philosopher, proposed that the way we perceive the world shapes our experience of it. He famously said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But without this why, we are bound to stay trapped in whatever life has given us. We end up searching for meaning within the very environment that stifles us, without ever realizing that the real path to healing lies in shifting our perception. This is not a new struggle. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, spoke of the concept of bad faith, living in a self-deceptive way, pretending to be something you are not, simply because it's easier than facing the discomfort of truth. Most of us live in bad faith with our past, with the places that harmed us. We trick ourselves into thinking that healing will come if we just endure a little more, if we just try harder. But in truth, the longer we stay in a harmful environment, the harder it becomes to see clearly, to disentangle ourselves from the very patterns that keep us in this loop. In this context, healing becomes not about fighting against the wounds, but about changing the conditions that created them. The unhealthy relationships, the toxic work environments, the past traumas, they're all symptoms of a larger issue, the way we've learned to accept them as normal. And it's here that we come to a crucial point. Our environment doesn't just reflect our pain, it reinforces it. Whether we realize it or not, we keep returning to the very places that shaped us because we are conditioned to believe that this is all we deserve. As Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, famously said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But changing ourselves requires the ability to see ourselves outside of the context that formed us. Aldous Huxley, in his work Brave New World, explored how society shapes our perception of reality and how we come to accept it without question. He warned of a future where individuals were molded by societal pressures, and their desire to conform to these pressures prevented any meaningful healing or self-understanding. We live in a world where we are constantly told that healing is simply a matter of time, of working harder, of going through the motions. But what if this is just another form of control? What if we've been taught to believe that healing is something that happens to us, within the confines of the very systems that created our wounds? If you step back for a moment, you'll see that the notion of healing as an isolated event, something we do within the confines of a single environment, is itself a form of mental conditioning. It is a trap built by years of societal, familial, and personal expectation. And it is a trap that, once we see it, becomes impossible to ignore. The truth is that you cannot heal in the place that made you sick, because that place has shaped your very understanding of what healing is. It has defined your expectations, your desires, and your sense of self. And until you are willing to step outside of it, to face the discomfort of uncertainty and change, you will remain trapped. In many ways, this is the fundamental existential dilemma. The desire for healing is universal, but it is also an intensely personal journey. It requires a willingness to look beyond the environment that shaped you and ask the question, what if there's a different way to exist? What if healing doesn't happen in the place that made you sick, but in an entirely new space? One where your wounds can be seen clearly, not in the shadow of your past, but in the light of a new beginning. The true challenge lies not in the environment itself, but in our willingness to change it. And to change it, we must first acknowledge that the environment, the people, the habits, the thoughts that have kept us chained, will never lead us to the healing we seek. So, the question remains, are you ready to leave the place that made you sick? The invisible chains that bind us to the environments that harmed us are not merely emotional or psychological. They are deeply embedded in the very fabric of our daily lives. Their effects stretch beyond the immediate, quietly shaping our thoughts, actions, and even our bodies in ways we scarcely understand. These consequences, while unseen, govern everything. Our relationships, our career choices, our physical health, and our sense of self-worth. The hidden cost of remaining in an environment that has made us sick is a slow, silent erosion of who we are and who we could become. At first glance, the effects of staying in a toxic environment may seem subtle, almost imperceptible. The stress from a difficult job, the subtle manipulation from a toxic relationship, the lingering sadness from a traumatic past. They don't always scream for attention. They whisper. But it's in their whispers that the most insidious consequences are felt. Our cognitive and emotional processes are influenced by our surroundings more than we realize. And when those surroundings are steeped in toxicity, they can hijack our minds in ways that leave us trapped. Let's start with something as fundamental as perception. When we remain in an environment that has hurt us, we begin to see the world through its lens. If we were raised in an environment where love was conditional, where praise was sparse, we may come to see love itself as something to be earned, something we don't inherently deserve. If we were shaped by an environment where failure was met with harsh punishment or ridicule, we may start to internalize the belief that failure equates to worthlessness. These aren't just fleeting thoughts. They are deeply ingrained perceptions that shape every action we take, every decision we make. This is where cognitive biases play a role. Cognitive biases are mental shortcuts our brains take to process information quickly, but they often lead to irrational or flawed thinking. One common cognitive bias is the confirmation bias, which causes us to seek out information that confirms what we already believe, while disregarding evidence to the contrary. If you've been raised in an environment where you've been told that you're not enough or that you'll never be successful, the confirmation bias will make you seek out information and experiences that reinforce that belief. You'll interpret the world through the lens of those deeply ingrained insecurities, which only perpetuates your sense of inadequacy. The more you stay in that environment, the stronger the bias becomes, until it's no longer a question of whether you can heal, but whether you even believe that healing is possible. This bias, however, doesn't just affect our thoughts. It affects our bodies as well. Neurological studies have shown that chronic stress, often the result of staying in a toxic environment, has a direct and tangible effect on our brain and body. Prolonged exposure to stress leads to increased cortisol levels, the hormone responsible for the body's fight or flight response. While short bursts of stress can be beneficial, pushing us to act when we need to, chronic stress wears us down over time. It shrinks the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation, and enlarges the amygdala, the area responsible for fear and emotional reactions. In simple terms, your brain becomes wired to be hyper-alert to danger and to store the emotional pain caused by the environment. The result is a vicious cycle. The more stressed you are, the less capable you are of seeing clearly, and the more likely you are to return to the same environment that keeps you stuck. This neurological impact doesn't stop with the brain. It affects your physical health in ways you may not immediately notice. Studies have shown that people who remain in toxic environments have higher rates of heart disease, chronic pain, and autoimmune disorders. The body and mind are not separate. They are deeply interconnected. The emotional weight of staying in a harmful environment takes its toll, not just on your mental state, but on your physical being as well. But the consequences are not limited to the individual. Societal conditioning plays a huge role in why we stay stuck in environments that harm us. From a young age, we are taught to endure, to keep pushing through, to never show weakness. The idea of resilience is often romanticized, but it's a dangerous myth when it becomes synonymous with enduring toxicity. Think of the many people who stay in unhealthy relationships because they've been told that love is about sacrifice, or those who remain in dead-end jobs because they believe success requires a never-ending grind. Society tells us that healing is a matter of perseverance, but what happens when perseverance means enduring something that's actively poisoning you? We are taught to survive in toxic environments, but we are not taught how to escape them. This societal conditioning extends to our concept of success. In cultures that prize productivity, status, and achievement, we are encouraged to push forward at all costs, even when our environments, whether physical, emotional, or psychological, are actively draining us. The idea of leaving a job, a relationship, or a life that's no longer serving us is often met with shame. After all, isn't success about overcoming adversity, about staying in the fight, about never giving up? Yet, the price of that success is steep. It comes at the cost of our mental well-being, our physical health, and our sense of self. The tragedy of it all is that we don't even see these consequences clearly. We continue to believe that healing happens through sheer willpower, that we can fix ourselves while staying in the same broken environment. We fail to see that our suffering is not just a result of our actions, but of an environment that continues to influence us at a deep, subconscious level. The longer we stay in that environment, the more its influence seeps into our core, and the harder it becomes to imagine a life beyond it. This is the unseen cost of staying where we've been hurt. It doesn't just shape our thoughts and bodies. It defines the very way we experience the world, making it almost impossible to imagine anything better. It's a slow erosion of self, a process so gradual that we often don't notice it until it's too late. And so the question becomes, what do you lose when you remain in the place that made you sick? What parts of yourself are slowly chipped away day by day until you no longer recognize the person you become? Breaking free from the environment that has kept you stuck is no easy task. It requires a radical shift in perspective, one that defies conventional wisdom and challenges everything you've been taught about healing and progress. This isn't about pushing harder, working longer, or simply enduring your circumstances. It's about an act of rebellion against the very forces that have defined your existence. The first step in breaking free is recognizing that healing does not occur within the same context that caused the wound. To heal, you must be willing to leave behind what has shaped you, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's terrifying. The paradox is that true healing requires a kind of revolution, a rebellion against the environment that formed you, a rebellion against the patterns of thought and behavior that have kept you in chains. This rebellion is not about simply leaving a job, a relationship, or a city. It's about changing the way you see the world. It's about changing the way you perceive your own limitations and your own capacity for growth. This is where the philosophy of existentialism offers profound insight. Jean-Paul Sartre, in his existential framework, emphasized the idea that existence precedes essence. In simple terms, this means that who you are is not defined by what has happened to you, but by the choices you make in the present moment. You are not the sum of your past wounds. You are the sum of the decisions you make today. To rebel, then, is to reject the identity that has been thrust upon you by your past. It's to say, I am not what I have endured. I am not the product of this toxic environment. I am the product of the choices I make moving forward. This shift in perspective is revolutionary because it places the power of healing squarely in your hands, and it removes the victimhood narrative that so many of us cling to. You are not a passive participant in your own life. You are the creator of your future. But this rebellion is not just an intellectual shift. It is a practical one as well. It's about making tangible changes in your life, even when those changes seem small or insignificant. Sometimes, breaking free means leaving behind relationships that have held you back, no matter how much you wish things could be different. Sometimes, it means quitting a job that drains you, even when society tells you to keep going. Sometimes, it means confronting the beliefs that have kept you stuck for so long and replacing them with new, empowering ones. In this process of rebellion, you must also confront the discomfort that comes with change. Change is never easy. It's often messy, uncertain, and painful. But as Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. The challenge of healing, then, is not to change the environment around you first. It's to change yourself, to recognize that the power to leave the place that made you sick lies within you. One of the most powerful examples of breaking free from a toxic environment comes from the life of Nelson Mandela. For decades, Mandela was imprisoned in a brutal, segregated society that sought to suppress his very identity. Yet, through those years, he never allowed the system to define him. He rebelled not by fighting back in the conventional sense, but by refusing to let the environment shape his inner world. He found peace and strength in his own mind. And when he was finally released, he was not broken by the years of imprisonment, but emboldened by the realization that true freedom comes from within. Mandela's rebellion wasn't just against apartheid. It was a rebellion against the belief that his circumstances could ever define his worth. Similarly, historical figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. didn't just rebel against oppressive systems. They rebelled against the mindset that kept them trapped within those systems. They understood that true healing and freedom were found not in changing the outside world first, but in changing how they related to it. They didn't stay in their broken environments and try to heal in the same toxic soil. They fought for the creation of entirely new spaces where healing could take place. In your own life, this kind of rebellion requires the courage to leave behind not just the places and people that harm you, but also the limiting beliefs you've held about yourself. It requires you to trust that you can create a new space for yourself, one where your past does not dictate your future, and one where your wounds can finally heal. This rebellion is also about embracing the uncertainty of change. We often stay in toxic environments because they provide a sense of security, even if that security is false. But real healing only begins when we embrace the unknown. When we leave behind the familiar and step into the uncertainty of the unknown, we open ourselves up to the possibility of true transformation. The environment that hurt you will always try to pull you back. The toxic patterns of thought, the old relationships, the familiar routines, they will all whisper to you that you're not strong enough to leave, that you're destined to fail. But the rebellion is not about avoiding these forces. It's about recognizing them and choosing to move forward despite them. True freedom and healing come when you break the chains of the past and rebel against the belief that you must remain in the place that made you sick. The act of leaving, of rebelling against the environment that shaped you, is the first step toward reclaiming your life and your true potential. It's a rebellion that will not only change you, it will change the world around you. So ask yourself, what would it look like if you rebelled against the environment that has kept you trapped? What if you decided, once and for all, that you will no longer live in a space that poisons your soul? The answer to that question is the first step in the most radical transformation of your life. You fought the internal battle, and now, as the dust settles, the ultimate truth emerges, staring you in the face, raw and unyielding. The journey you've undertaken, leaving behind the toxic environments, the crippling beliefs, the patterns that held you hostage, has led you to this profound realization. You cannot heal in the place that made you sick, but more importantly, you are not defined by the wounds it gave you. This truth is both liberating and terrifying. It shatters everything you believed about growth, progress, and recovery. It forces you to confront the fact that you are not the sum of your wounds, nor are you the result of the environments that tried to shape you. You are more than the scars of your past. You are the possibility of what you choose to become in the future. This realization, this shift in perspective, holds the key to everything. Healing does not happen through mere survival or enduring the environments that have broken us. Healing happens when we embrace our own power to create new spaces for ourselves, spaces where our potential can flourish. The truth that begins to unfold here is the realization that healing is not a return to something better. It is the creation of something entirely new. It is the recognition that you are not the product of your past, nor the byproduct of what has harmed you. You are the architect of your future, and it is within your power to reshape the narrative of your life. The truth, ultimately, is that healing requires recreation, the act of building yourself anew, away from the environments that once defined you. This new understanding comes with an unexpected clarity. No longer do you feel the need to revisit your old wounds in search of resolution. You no longer need to dissect your past to find healing. Instead, you start to see that healing is an ongoing process, one that happens in the present moment, through the choices you make right now. In rejecting the places and beliefs that once held you captive, you are giving yourself permission to become someone you've never allowed yourself to be. Someone whole, someone free, someone empowered. But this truth, as liberating as it is also a challenge. The world around you will try to pull you back into your old patterns, into the old spaces that once caused you harm. It will whisper that you are too fragile to step outside of what you know, that you cannot escape the forces that have shaped you. But as you come to realize, those forces only have as much power as you give them. The true test of healing lies in whether you are willing to face the world on your own terms, to reject the familiar toxic spaces, and to choose to live in a new way. This new way of living requires radical honesty with yourself. It requires you to ask uncomfortable questions about the environments you've been holding on to, whether they be physical, emotional, or psychological. It forces you to confront your own resistance to change, the deep-seated fears that hold you back from embracing the unknown. But in doing so, you open the door to a life that is no longer defined by what's behind you. You step into a world where you are no longer defined by the wounds you've carried, but by the strength and wisdom you've gained from walking through them. In this new world, you begin to see that healing is not a destination. It's a way of living. It's not about fixing what's broken. It's about allowing yourself the freedom to create something that has never existed before. The truth is that healing isn't a return to something you've lost. It's a transformation, a redefinition of who you are in relation to the world around you. And in the end, this truth is the most profound realization of all. You are not your wounds. You are not the place that made you sick. You are the person who has the power to leave it behind, to reinvent yourself, and to create a new reality that serves you, not just as a survivor, but as a creator of your own destiny. The journey may never be easy. There will be moments of doubt, moments when the world seems to pull you back to what you've left behind. But as you walk forward, with every step, you leave a trace of the old self behind, shedding the past layer by layer. And with each layer that falls away, you step more fully into your own truth, into a version of yourself that was always there, waiting to be awakened. So when you look back, whether it be weeks, months, or years from now, remember this. The place that made you sick no longer has power over you. You have healed. And in healing, you have become the creator of your life, the master of your destiny, and the person you were always meant to be. This is the ultimate truth. You cannot heal in the place that made you sick, but you can create a new place, a new reality, where healing is not just possible, but inevitable. And in this new reality, the future is yours to shape.